Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. First of all, I got some good news for you. The weekend is here. If you've been waiting for the weekend, it's here. I appreciate you starting your morning out, or however when you're watching the show. We really appreciate it. I'm going fishing. As soon as this show is over, I'm cutting out of here. You know, the old salty dog, make fishing great again. It's supposed to be a spectacular weekend for us here in Florida, so I hope it is with you, and I will tell you all about it when I come back Monday. All right, we got a great show for you today. We're going to start out and basically going to dedicate most, if not all of the show, to this latest case, this abortion case in front of the Supreme Court. There have been opening arguments for it on Wednesday, and it is really going to consume more and more of the political dialogue, the atmosphere, the oxygen. Believe me, especially if it continues to go against the progressive left. They are going to fight for this sacred cow like you've never seen before. So we're going to talk about that. You might remember, by the way, that I told you this earlier towards the beginning of this year. Actually, I told you that come October, when the Supreme Court takes up their cases, and this Mississippi case was on the docket, I didn't know exactly when they would take it, but all heck was going to break loose in D.C. over that. It was an easy prediction. If you want to see, anytime you want to see our podcast, the easiest way to do that is to go to the Excluded app. So go to your app store, spell Excluded by dropping the E, put the big X up there, Excluded app. Check it out. But before we go any further, I always have to talk about special opportunities you have, and at Christmas time you couldn't have a better one than this. Look above the video, no matter when or where you're watching it, and click it on the BDU link, Big Daddy Unlimited. They are your go-to place, your Second Amendment headquarters, because not only will you get factory direct pricing on guns and ammunition, but over 100,000 related items, and BDU literally defends your Second Amendment on a daily basis. Now, if you want to see just how great a savings you can get, check out the show that precedes us, Denny's Deals. Denny comes across John Martin Talks Facebook page. He's also on our Excluded Facebook. As I say about Excluded, drop the E, spell it with a big X. He comes on there at 10 o'clock Eastern Time for about 15 or 20 minutes, picks some products from the Big Daddy Unlimited arsenal and demonstrates them, and then he gives you the factory direct pricing. Once you see just how great a savings, get excited, go back to above our video, click on that BDU link, follow the directions. You'll be helping yourself and the show. Those savings will be yours, and you can make everybody happy at Christmas time by putting maybe a little 38 snub nose in the stocking of somebody you love. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this show. This comes to you via Politico. Takeaways from the Supreme Court showdown over abortion. And I put this first meme up here, picture, and I'm going to play a little video here in just a minute, but I want you to understand what we're actually talking about here. We're talking about not some abstract zygote or whatever. We're talking about stopping the beat of a baby's heart. That's at the center of a lot of these new abortion, or if you want to call it restriction abortions, is when they call them heartbeat bills. So when the heart starts beating, Texas has got it. Mississippi's is slightly different. Every state is a little bit different. But what's got the progressive left in an uproar is that they want to stop the beating of a baby's heart. And so we need to make sure that we put this in the real language. Don't try to pacify it and everything else. This is what it's about. Back to this story. At least 5 justices expressed a willingness to significantly par down, if not overturn, Roe versus Wade during Wednesday's argument over a Mississippi law prohibiting abortion after 15 weeks. It's a version of that heartbeat bill I was just talking about. But they talk about this. Let's break this down for just a second. It says here that at least 5 justices expressed a willingness to significantly pare or par down, if not overturn, Roe versus Wade. That's really not 100% true. it basically, it depends on how you look at it. If you are, because that's one thing about this abortion issue, there are passions really strong on both sides of this issue, and there's not a lot of compromise, although I'll talk about compromise here in just a minute. But I can tell you this, if you question anything about abortion, if abortion is not just 100% a constitutional right, abortion on demand, if you question it at any level, even a logical level, you're going to be hit with your trying to overturn Roe versus Wade. So the fact that this case in Mississippi is even coming up, even though the Supreme Court, and we'll get into it more in just a minute, is actually come out and said they're not really trying to overturn Roe versus Wade, they're trying to return these decisions to the states. The mere fact that they even take up this case is anti-abortion according to the left. That's just the way they see it. And it is a threat to Roe versus Wade. Me even talking about it in this show is probably a threat to Roe versus Wade. And as I told you, I want to make sure that we understand exactly what we're talking about. I showed you that little graphic with the baby's heartbeat. Now I want to get more specific. You should probably save this video, and anybody who is debating you on this issue, and I'm not saying there isn't room to debate, but let's make clear, crystal clear, and this is one thing we have not done, conservatives have not really done. We haven't made crystal clear, because the left is always vague about this stuff. But we need to make crystal clear exactly what we're talking about here. Play it. I can hear that ringing in my ears right now. And I mean, I'm not talking about a negative thing. I hear that baby's heartbeat in my headphones. We're talking about stopping the beating heart of a baby, or whatever you want to call it. It is talking about that, because after about 6 weeks, the baby's heart pretty much is always beating. There's some variance in that, but certainly by 15 weeks, which is the Mississippi law, is prohibiting, it's a version of the heartbeat law. We just need to make clear exactly what we're talking about, because it's not just some kind of vague in the ether concept of abortion. It is stopping a baby's heart. We need to make the left defend that, absolutely, because we've been giving them too much slack on that. Nearly 2 hours of oral arguments revealed court divided not only on the merits of this particular state law, but also on whether compromise is possible on abortion rights. The future of the court standing, this is what Politico is saying, not me, the future of the court standing in the American public, the bar for overturning long-standing precedent, and what other dominoes might fall should a majority decide to overturn Roe versus Wade, which basically made abortion constitutional. I want to play you a video, because they act like that the conservatives are the boogeyman in this, that somehow if they overturn Roe versus Wade, which is really not even what they're discussing, they're basically talking about these state heartbeat laws, as I just told you about, but they always want to make it the cornerstone of Roe versus Wade, because literally abortion is the foundation of the progressive left. It has become the foundation of the Democratic Party. I'm not saying all Democrats, I'm saying your leaders. If you don't think so, then just watch this video. This was from a few months ago. This is when Gorsuch, and then followed up by Kavanaugh, got on the Supreme Court. It's even before Amy Coney Barrett got on there. This is Chuck Schumer, who was the minority leader. God help us, he's the majority leader in the U.S. Senate now. This is him on the steps of the Supreme Court. And listen to what he has to say. Check it out.
Fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. The bottom line is very simple. We will stand with the American people. We will stand with American women. We will tell President Trump and Senate Republicans who have stacked the court with right-wing ideologues that you're going to be gone in November and you will never be able to do what you're trying to do now ever again. You hear that over there on the far right? You're gone in November.
That's good enough. I hope that it's true that they're gone in November. But think about what Schumer is saying there. He's calling out a Supreme Court justice, a couple of them, saying you won't know what hit you. You will be reaping the whirlwind. That sounds like pretty violent rhetoric to me. Has Schumer ever been banned? I mean, that's what I keep asking. All these things about banning people, you know, I don't ever advocate for violence here on our show. Matter of fact, I tell you to man the political ramparts so we don't have to man the real ones again. That's what I talk about. And I guess I talk about personal defense like Big Daddy Unlimited stuff. But to me, defending yourself, your home, your property, your family is a God-given right, and I would say it's a human right, you know. So I don't advocate violence. I advocate defending your home, your person, your family, your business, that kind of thing. But I don't advocate violence. As I say, I tell you to man the political rampart, that we need to eliminate people by voting. But Schumer is on the SCOTUS, the steps of the Supreme Court, saying you're going to weep the whirlwind. I mean, it is absolute. But, you know, he not only was he not banned, but he's elevated, right? But here's Politico's takeaways from the arguments on Wednesday. Listen to this. Roberts, talking about Chief Justice Roberts, seeks a compromise but finds no takers. Says here, as many expected, Chief Justice John Roberts called for compromise, but no one else, not the lawyers for either side, nor the other justices, seemed interested in buying what Roberts was selling. And that is not a surprise whatsoever, because when it comes to the abortion issue, it's pretty passionate, as I said, on both sides. So Roberts wants to be a moderate. He wants to be a compromiser down the middle. Well, what I tell you all the time, you know what you find in the middle road, at least in my neck of the wood? Dead skunks and possums are what you find in the middle of the road here, and there's no room for compromise. We need to paint with bold colors, not the pastels like, you know, like Mr. Reagan said. He was voted, by the way, the most popular president just the other day in a poll, and Biden the least. Imagine that. Conservative, but here's this thing about compromising. I'm not opposed, and I'm not even talking about abortion, just to put us off the side for a minute. The politics, has been said, is the art of compromise. And I, to a certain extent, agree with that. You can't just be, you know, all this and my way or the highway. That's not how a representative republic works. And it's not working very well now because of that. But let me just say this. An abortion, I think, is right in the middle of this. Conservatives have been compromising all along, period. They've been, it's the left that is uncompromising. I mean, all you got to do is just look at the abortion issue. I mean, I was going to tell this later, but I might as well tell it now. You know, I call it my kind of story on abortion. When I was growing up, in the 60s and 70s, when I first kind of came of age and realized in the 70s, I graduated high school in 78, to be a perspective, getting an old gray-haired white dude right now. I got my white privilege card right here, just in case, you know, just, I don't know what it means, but I got it. I don't feel guilty about much, so I don't apologize for anything. But, you know, that's when abortion and birth control and all of this first started coming up, because like 73 was Roe versus Wade, right? But the pill, all that kind of came about when I was actually coming of age. We won't even go down that particular road. But I remember I didn't think about abortion really at all. I really never came up to me. And then when I thought about it, when I heard about it, because, you know, I knew, for instance, found out later that some women had left our little community to go have an abortion or to have a baby. That kind of, it was always whispers and stuff like that. So whenever I thought about abortion, I thought about it as really didn't affect me one way or another. So I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought. And then as I progressed and I started thinking about it more, I kind of thought about it as it's really not my business. It's not my business, it's your business and all of that. So, And then I kind of bought into what the Clintons were selling, this idea of safe, legal, and rare. It made sense to me at that time. You got to figure the age I was. But the left will always take things to extreme. And I'll show you a video in a few minutes that proves this. But they will always take everything to the extreme. So I went from probably not my business, not even thinking about it, to safe, legal, and rare, to the left made me take a stand because they carried it so far. And I'll prove it to you in just a minute. Back to this story. Have times actually changed for women since '73, and does it matter? We're talking about this Mississippi case that is now before the Supreme Court that could have major impact on states' rights, especially the heartbeat laws going forward. Attorneys from Mississippi focused on how much society has changed in the 50 years since Roe was decided and said that should force reconsideration of the ruling. Interesting point. Wrote the state's Attorney General of Mississippi in his brief. This is what he wrote. In 1973, there was little support for women who wanted a full family life and successful career. Maternity leave was rare, really unheard of. Paternity leave was unheard of, and I agree with that. The gold standard for professional success was 9 to 5 with a corner office. The flexibility of the gig economy was a fairy tale. So what he's saying is that in 1973, women, if they got pregnant, were basically trapped. And especially if it's an unexpected pregnancy, they were virtually trapped. So they were pursuing abortions and sometimes back alley and all of that kind of thing to actually free themselves. And no one, let me repeat this, no one is pushing for back alley abortions again. In fact, these heartbeat laws don't prohibit abortion. They just narrow the window of time that you can have it. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a state law passed, maybe proposed, but passed that bans abortion outright. Maybe I'm wrong. Chime in on Facebook or wherever and let me know. Rumble, if you're watching there. By the way, we're live on Rumble now every day, YouTube as well. So appreciate you Rumblers and you YouTubers. Good morning on that. So back to this article. So I think that the state attorney is making a pretty good point here, that it's true what they're saying about women and their position in 1973. The state solicitor general pushed this point on Wednesday, saying contraception is more accessible, now this is from Mississippi State Solicitor, accessible and affordable and available than it was at the time of Roe or Casey, which is another abortion case. And that is absolutely true. But here's the problem. Birth control is widely available now. Now, they make a case that it's not as much for poor people, which I think is just not true, and I'll get into that in a second. But abortion, and this is one of the things that made me kind of wake up to it. Abortion has really become a form of birth control now for a lot of people. Instead of taking, the pill and everything else, they just, because, I know for a fact, I've known quite a few women who've had multiple abortions. 6, 7, even a dozen of them. And the reason I know this, just so you understand, is because for 15 years I worked as a counselor at an alcohol and drug treatment center. And I had to deal with women having abortions. I wasn't allowed to have an opinion, didn't want to have an opinion at that time. But I had to supervise and actually go to abortion clinics with women who were having abortion, and some of them were my clients and that kind of thing, and some of them had had multiple abortions to the point that there's no other thing to conclude that it was a form of birth control. I'm not judging them, I'm just stating fact. And the other thing, and we'll cover this more in a minute, that's also a truth, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I have never met a woman that celebrated having an abortion, that thought, oh my God, this is fantastic. Now, I see them talking about it sometimes on TV. I see some of these actors say, oh, I wish I had an abortion. I wish I had 3. There was one that said that a while back. I can tell you, of all the women I've ever had contact with, like I say, most of it centered around recovery and my drug treatment counseling position. I never met one that was happy about it. not one. Lawyers for both the Mississippi Clinic and the Justice Department roundly rejected these arguments, this compromise, if you will, that Justice Roberts were putting up there. Roundly rejected it. And so my first question when I read this statement, and I know the answer to this, but why is the Justice Department even involved in this? Shouldn't it be the abortion clinics versus the state of Mississippi? The Justice Department, I understand they're involved in it because it is, quote, a constitutional right, which no one could show me in the Constitution where it is. And they talk about that in a little bit. Both sides actually agree upon that, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But the Biden Justice Department, you know, it's interesting the things that they're interested in. Killing children, right at the top of their list. Preventing infected people from coming across our border in the middle of a pandemic, not so much. Just interesting what they choose. Solicitor General Elizabeth Pregler, that's from the Department of Justice, a federal position, highlighted the struggle of low-income people to afford contraceptives and that small but not insignificant rate they fall as an additional reason to keep abortion accessible. And I got to tell you, and if I'm wrong, just chime in on Facebook, Rumble, or whatever. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I think this is simply false. I'm not saying she's a liar. I'm simply saying it's false. It's not true. There is ample access to any kind of not only abortion, but ample access to birth control. I can tell you that birth control, I don't know of anybody that cannot get birth control if they want it right now. I don't know of a single woman that cannot get birth control if they absolutely want it. It's free, depending on your income, all over the United States of America. It's part of Obamacare, for God's sakes, right? I mean, there was several landmark cases surrounding that, like the Sisters of the Poor, I think it was, that sued because they didn't want to provide contraceptives, and I think they were defeated in that, right? I'm not 100% sure, I don't remember exactly, but I can tell you this idea that birth control is not readily available, whether you agree with it or not, is a whole nother story. It's simply readily available. So that's a bogus argument. A back and forth ensued over the more recent proliferation of so-called safe haven. And that's the laws that allow, like in Florida, we've had this for at least a decade now, because we had a real big problem with women abandoning their newborn babies in trash cans and bathrooms and that kind of thing. So Florida passed a law, which I totally agree with, at least a decade ago, where you could, no questions asked, take your baby to a fire department or emergency services or you know, a emergency room and just drop your baby off right there. No questions asked, no penalty, no nothing. And other states had this, and Amy Coney Barrett brought this up. She suggested that this reduced the need for abortion, an argument that Julie Reichelman, an attorney for the Center for Reproductive Rights, which represented Mississippi's sole remaining abortion clinic. There's only one abortion clinic left because of some of this pressure they're under. Mainly it's because the doctors don't want to practice there because they're getting paid bigger other places. That's part of it. But this, let me get the name right, this Reichelman, Julie Reichelman, she dismissed this argument that Amy Coney Barrett brought about these safe havens as irrelevant to the core question at hand. And that statement jumped out at me. Irrelevant to the core question at hand. Aren't we talking about trying to, in this case, either prevent abortions or taking care of children? I mean, isn't that really the core debate is whether like life starts at a certain point and whether a child, and we're going to talk about rights here in just a moment, whether an unborn is a human being or not. Isn't that really at the core of this? So I don't agree. Now, you may or may not agree with the whole safe haven and everything else law, but the idea that protecting a living human being is not at the core question is just phenomenal to me. It kind of says a lot. It's perplexing, I guess, a better word. Perplexing to me because why, I said earlier, that, you know, I've had more experience with abortion than I ever dreamed I would with my position as a drug counselor. And I told you, I never met a woman that actually celebrated. And one of the things that has really been baffling to me, and I would love to have somebody who is pro-abortion, who is absolutely pro-abortion, explain this to me. Why are they so eager about this? Why are they so celebratory? It's one thing to be passionate and defend a woman's right to choose. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it. I understand that. But why so eager? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about stopping the beating heart of what I would say is a human being, but there's no doubt that they're talking about stopping a beating heart of something, right? That's what the heartbeat bills are all about. Why so eager? And every time I think about eagerness, I think about Governor Cuomo. Now, he's gone right now, but this is him about 2 years ago. He's signing an abortion bill which expands abortion rights in the state and city of New York to the point of literally, as the late great Rush Limbaugh said, the fourth trimester where they, you know, can be born and killed. I want you to watch this bill signing and see how happy they are about it. Then we'll come back and talk about it. Check it out.
Now the governor will sign the bill.
I mean, listen to that, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I just don't understand. Please explain to me the glee of it. I just don't get that. I understand you may believe that, and I know there's passions on both sides of the issue. I understand that. I just don't understand the glee of expanding abortion rights because you're stopping a beating heart. This is why I think it's extremely important for those of us conservatives to actually present what they're really doing. Don't let them sugarcoat this. Talk about what they're really doing. When they're cheering about it, play that beating heart thing, because this is what I do not understand. As I say, I can respect that people are on different sides of this issue, but the left, to have so much glee about this, I find it disturbing. Am I alone? I mean, even if you're pro-abortion, does that not disturb you? That they're so celebratory, man. It's unbelievable. Justice Elena Kagan said specific legal and cultural changes, now she's on the left of the court, that's to say the least, but Elena Kagan said specific legal and cultural changes were immaterial because the basic question of a person's right to decide whether to continue a pregnancy remains the same as it was in 1973. So nothing has changed. I think a little has changed, and we'll talk about that. But Kagan said, in the end, we are in the same exact place as we were then, except that we're not, because there's been 50 years of water under the bridge. So a lot of precedent. We're used to it, right? We accept it. A lot of compromises. Well, how many compromises have been made on the left on this issue? From what I can see, zero. The whole issue has been compromised on the right. She said 50 years water under the bridge, 50 years of decisions saying that this is part of our law, that this is part of the fabric of a woman's existence in this country. Now, she has a point up to a point. It has been going on a long time. There are many people that can't remember, abortion not being legal, okay? And so that's just a fact. She's right about that. But compromise on principles, That's where things are different. You know, if you think about it, what has changed since 1973? How about science? How about science? Science has changed just a little. Doesn't the left always talk about, but you got to believe in the science, it is science, the science, the science, even though they promote stuff that is scientifically bogus all the time. But what about the science of life? In 1973, a baby that was only like 16 weeks old, I think there's a couple of cases right now, babies that were only like 20 to 21 weeks old that were prematurely born, literally only weighed a few ounces, and there's a couple of them in particular that I saw in another article that are like 20 years old now. You know, so the science of keeping a baby alive has grown dramatically. So what if science, this is a question I've never, they have these presidential debates and stuff, and they say, especially Republicans, how many of you believe in the science of evolution, you know, and the Republicans doing this and all that kind of stuff. But if they ever ask the Democrats, how many of you believe in the science that life begins at conception? Because there is more and more proof coming out every day, literally every day, that it does. It certainly begins a lot quicker than the heartbeat, right? And I just saw this the other day, and we're not going to get too deep into it. Maybe we'll talk about it. It's something to keep in mind. Scientists now have come out and said that they can create life where there wasn't life. They can combine artificial intelligence with actual organic materials, and they can reproduce themselves. Have you seen this? Look it up. I don't know all the details of it, but it's frog eggs. Somehow they do some kind of scraping, as they call it. They combine it with a robot, a little, you know, microscopic robot, and they bond together and they can recreate themselves. So I say all that, not trying to get too scientific, science fiction on you, is science reality. So the whole concept, think about creation. If you can procreate, isn't that a sign of life? Now they say they're developing this so that they can make medications and transplants and cure organs and tailor-made for you and all that. And I'm not disputing that. But if science can now create a combination of artificial intelligence and God's creation, biology, and they can reproduce themselves, where are we going to be in another 10 years, let alone 50 years? So this science of life is a moving needle. But if you listen to the people on the left who always are telling you believe in science, they believe in it. And there's two sciences they don't believe in. They don't believe in the science of life begins at conception, which is becoming more and more conclusive all the time, and they sure don't believe in the science of economics, because that pretty much tells you. But I go back to this compromise and we'll move on. The left is uncompromising when it comes to this. The right has been compromising bipartisanship, which means Republicans cave, forever. And we see in it right now with Biden. The Republicans in some ways propping up Biden, man, with the whole spending bill, you know, and everything else. But let me just ask you this and we'll move on. If you were born, let's say, like me, let's just use my age, in 1960, has the country moved further to the right or further to the left since then? To me, it's a no-brainer. It's moved much further to the left, and we continue to slide to the left. So I say there's been plenty of compromise, but it's pretty much always been conservatives that do it. Abortion is the core of progressive agenda. That's one of the statements I made. I kind of made it earlier, but I want to reiterate that. Abortion, this is why, Schumer was up on the SCOTUS just threatening the Supreme Court judges, because abortion is the core of the progressive agenda. I don't totally understand why, but there's no doubt that it is. Listen to this right here. Abortion rights advocates warned that overruling Roe, which is not even what they're talking about, and paying little deference to precedent could lead to an upheaval in American law, lowering the bar for what it would take to reverse other momentous decisions. So they're saying that if they overturn Roe, which, as I say, they're not even talking about, that it is going to basically disrupt the entire nation. I'm telling you, they're going to get really crazy as this thing moves forward. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, also a hardcore leftist, said that the High Court's 2015 Obergefell versus Hodges ruling upholding the right to same-sex marriages. So now we're talking about abortion and same-sex marriages where they can't even have a child. You know, I mean, contrary to what they'll tell you. It's just amazing how they the confluence of this. The right to same-sex marriage and ruling from the 1960s upholding a right to contraception. So, you know, people, they're not even talking about that either, are among those that could be easily overruled. So they're making you sound like if they hold up the Mississippi case, the heartbeat case, and they prevent them from stopping a beating heart at 15 weeks on abortion, that it's all of a sudden going to overturn gay rights, it's going to overturn reproductive rights, everything else. It says, especially since the rights upheld by those decisions, like abortion, aren't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. This coming from Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And you're right, especially mentioned in the Constitution. Wow. So she's admitting that abortion is not in the Constitution. You know, that for a leftist to actually say that is dangerous ground for them. But it's not specifically mentioned. But then again, if you think about it, what difference does it make? What difference does it make if it's mentioned in the Constitution or not? And you go, what the heck are you talking about, John? Well, as my friend Billy Bob would tell you many times, if you haven't met my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass, he's got a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. We're determined to stay in the public square, social media, algorithm, all that stuff. We need your help. Like us, share us, push it out far and wide. We need our numbers to keep growing, and they are, and we appreciate that. But like Billy Bob tells me, what difference does it make? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, he's right. It doesn't make any difference whether it's in the Constitution or not. Not to the Democrats, because the things that are in the Constitution, they ignore on a daily basis, man. How about the First Amendment? We just had the guy from Twitter come out. We talked about that. I think I told you how to look at our podcast, but get the Excluded app. Go to your app store and spell Excluded by dropping the E. Put the big X up there, Excluded, and get the app. You can watch archives of our show and other original programming. But the guy from Twitter, the new CEO of Twitter, said he's not going to be bound by the First Amendment, and their job was to control speech, the conversation in America, right? So the left doesn't believe in the First Amendment. They used to be champions of the First Amendment. They don't believe it. Don't even talk about the Second Amendment because you notice that, by the way, we don't hear much about curtailing Second Amendment rights right now because a lot of Democrats, especially a lot of like inner city black Americans, are exercising their Second Amendment rights because guess what? It ain't white supremacists they scared of. It's all that looting and gang banging that's going on. Yeah, I called it looting. That's what it is. But, you know, I'd love to ask somebody like Kamala Harris, like Ocasio-Cortez. I would ask Joe Biden, but he wouldn't know what I was talking about, that because he's already answered this question, so we'll play that in a minute. But what in the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, do you actually agree on anymore? Any of it? What part of the Constitution do you actually agree on? Because they don't agree on states' rights to control the elections and everything else. That's like Jim Crow laws, right? And it's always interesting to me that the people that squawk about Jim Crow are the very people that brought you Jim Crow. But that's another story for another day. But what part of the Bill of Rights or any of the Constitution that they actually believe in? It doesn't seem to me like they believe in any of it. They don't believe in the First Amendment. Yeah. They're not bound by it. That's what the guy from Twitter said. They don't believe in the Second Amendment, which I tell you, to me, the Second Amendment, and if you want to get your Second Amendment rights exercised, go to above the video no matter when or where you're watching it. Check out Big Daddy Unlimited. Click on that link, follow the instructions, and you will be all about the Second Amendment. Trust me on that, helping yourself and helping the show. But they don't believe in the Second Amendment. I tell you that the Second Amendment is not only an inalienable, God-given right, but I would maintain it's a basic human right. Because tell me where I'm wrong. This is where we got to confront these people on the issues. Tell me where, for instance, abortion, you know, all that kind of stuff, stopping the beating heart, confronting that. But when it comes to the Second Amendment, tell me why I don't have a human right to defend myself, my family, and my possessions, my business, and everything else. Tell me I don't have a right to defend that. make the case for it, because they're doing it right now. The Supreme Court is taking up a case on that as well in New York. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. We'll keep you posted. But the left doesn't believe in the U.S. Constitution anymore. They don't want to just amendment. They want to throw it out or ignore it. But remember, as far as I said, I'd like to ask Joe Biden the question about the Second Amendment or what amendments. Remember, Joe Biden said this about the Second Amendment, but it really applies to all of it. Check it out.
But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute.
No amendment is absolute. Do you understand just how dangerous that is? Because Biden has said two things that I'd never heard a president say, and are the two most dangerous things I've ever heard any president say, I guess besides I'm running for re-election. But he said no amendment is absolute. He also said we the people is the government, him and Nancy Pelosi, which is totally opposite the Constitution. But when he says that no amendment is absolute, that means that the Constitution is not worth the paper it's written on. Because the Constitution, at its core, is a legal document. A lot of people don't understand this. It is a legal, binding agreement between the rugged individuals, the American people that founded this nation, giving their permission to a federal government to govern them. That is what the Constitution is. It's a legally binding contract. And I say that to say this: when you make an amendment to a legal binding contract, it is not over here to the right or to the left. It is a part of the contract. If you don't believe me, go try to change something that's been amended to your contract or whatever. It don't work. So an amendment to the Constitution changes it is part of the Constitution. So when Biden says that no amendment is absolute, he's essentially saying that the Constitution is whatever I say it is. And that is pretty scary stuff. It is. Back to this article. Elsewhere in Wednesday's arguments, conservative justice raised the question of the rights of the fetus itself and the need to balance them with the rights of the pregnant individual. But see, progressives don't believe that the infants have any rights, period, whether they're fetus or they're born like in the fourth trimester. I want to play you this video, and I said earlier that I was going to show you proof of just how far the left will take abortion, and this video proves it. This is Governor Northam, the guy that couldn't remember if he was the one wearing the blackface or the Ku Klux Klan hood. Yeah, that guy, talking about abortion, and he's a doctor, by the way. And when I told you earlier about my kind of journey, if you will, on abortion, I told you that the left forced me to take a stand, because when I heard stuff like this right here, when I saw the celebrations like Cuomo we played earlier, when I actually saw firsthand how heartbreaking this is for women, and I actually care about women, and then to hear Northam say this, check it out.
By a Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth, and she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure, and explain her answer?
Yeah, and I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I would tell you, first thing I would say, this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again, we want the government not to be involved.
So the baby is born. Born now. Think about that. What he's saying, what Northam is saying, is the baby's actually alive outside the mother's womb, all the way up through the 3rd trimester, and then they'll have a discussion about what to do with the baby, and then depending on how that discussion goes, off with their head. The left made me take a stand on this, and to me, I don't see how you can agree with, how you can celebrate that is just baffling to me, man. But we're about out of time, and I want to make a couple of quick points. So this article is long. This thing is going to be followed for quite some time. I want to read you something that Justice Kavanaugh said in these oral arguments, because I think it really is important, and then we'll get into 2 or 3 videos if I have time to play it, because this is going to get crazy. But this is what Kavanaugh said, and I think this is the crux of this case. He said, why should this court be the arbiter rather than Congress? So he's not talking about overturning Raid. He's talking about putting it back to votes of the people. Why should this court be the arbiter rather than Congress? That state legislature, keep in mind, this, as Justice, one of the liberal justices said, this is not in the Constitution, abortion. Why should this court be the arbiter rather than Congress? The state legislatures, this is Kavanaugh, state Supreme Courts, the people being able to resolve this. And there will be different answers in Mississippi, in New York, different answers in Alabama and in California, because there are 2 different interests at stake, and the people in those states might value those interests somewhat differently. He is absolutely spot on about this. But it is going to get really crazy. Look at this video of them talking about my body, my choice. Check it out. That's good enough. It's my body, my choice. Unless it has to do with a mandatory vaccine, then of course it ain't your choice at all. It's the government doing it, man. It's unbelievable. And then you remember this from when Kavanaugh was actually being sworn in at the Supreme Court. Remember this video from that day? Check it out.
Besieging the front door of the Supreme Court. I don't recall ever seeing a scene like this. Obviously a lot of passion in this crowd. Whether or not this carries over to November is a distinction that nobody is really concerned with at the minute. It's getting hard to hear.
Survivors. We believe survivors. Of course, they don't believe survivors if they accuse Joe Biden of sexual misconduct or whatever. But here's what really scares me, because this thing is going to get really, really crazy, ladies and gentlemen. But what really scares me is this video, and we'll close the show with it, from Lexington, Kentucky. Now, this doesn't have to do with abortion, but it is Black Lives Matter, which is one of the arm wings of the Democratic Party, and they're talking about when things don't go their way, what they want to do. Check it out. When you think of the passions behind this abortion issue, if they don't get 100% what they want, they're going to burn it down. And that is not going to be good for anybody. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to all our social media sites, like them and share them with others. Remember, Big Daddy Unlimited at above the video. Click on that, follow directions for that factory direct pricing. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Man, we better pray for this nation, because she needs it and deserves it, I think, more than ever. But above all else, like I say each and every weekend, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day and a blessed weekend.